Hey guys, Mr. V over here, doing a book review today for The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, or some of you may know it as Anne Frank's Diaries. Now, this is a nonfiction book where you're reading the diary of a young girl, Anne Frank, and her life, where her and her family, who are Jewish, they are living in Amsterdam in the early 1940s when the Nazis invade, and they must go into hiding. And you read about what it is like when they go into hiding, when they're living in an attic, or basically an annex, a very small area, and just her life when they're in hiding, and her diary entries. Now, I decided to read this book because I'm currently reading about World War II. I'm reading a very big book on World War II, and that talks about a lot of the battles and the leaders and all that kind of stuff, which is interesting. But I wanted to know what the everyday person felt like, and especially the Jewish, because the Jews were treated just horribly through a lot of Europe during World War II, especially after the Nazi invasions. So I wanted to see what was their perspective, and I also thought it was cool reading a diary entry, because a diary entry, you get what they felt the day of when something happens. Whereas some people will write a book years later, and they'll write what it was like living then, and that's still a great book. But it's very different reading a diary where they're writing something that happened that day. So, that was also interesting. Now, Anne Frank, she was 13 in 1942. And it shows kind of also what a teenager thinks of some of these things that are going on. Because she didn't understand the full situation of what was going on. She understood some of the stuff, and she also, she saw how she was treated, but she didn't understand the full scope of everything. And she even wrote in one of her early diary entries that she knew they'd probably have to go into hiding. She just didn't know when, where, or how they would go into hiding. And there's just a lot of unknown to where it will make her obviously anxious. And you can see that in her writing in the very beginning. But also when they go into hiding, when you read some of those journal entries about how it was just so fast. And real life is so different than fiction. Because she writes in there how they can't take their suitcases because they can't make people think they are leaving, or else the Nazis will stop them. It has to be all secretive, and they're just wearing multiple layers of clothes, and that will be the clothes they wear for the next forever, how long they're in hiding. They don't even know. And how they have to leave basically all their possessions behind. And there's so few things you can bring, because again, real life is very different than fiction. And she has many journal entries about that kind of stuff, and you get to see it. These are things that you just don't think about. And she also writes about her experiences in hiding, about the struggles they had for food and space, and even things like just the bathroom, and just the scariness of hiding. Knowing that you are trapped in hiding, that you can't even look outside in the window, you can't make noise. The hiding place they had was above a warehouse, office area, so they couldn't make noise during the day because it was a secret area. So it was just, these are things that she writes about you don't even think of. And she even wrote in the book, "Not being able to go outside upsets me more than I can say, and I'm terrified our hiding place will be discovered and that we will be shot." She writes that, and it's just scary to think that a 13-year-old had to live through that. And it's not just her, there's other people in the attic with her. But she not only worries about getting shot, they have to worry about things like starvation, because there are people who will deliver food to them in secret. But what if those people get killed? Where did they get caught? And in those days, you couldn't buy unlimited food. Everyone was given food ration cards. So you had to only get a certain amount of food. So it's how do those people even get food for you? Because they need to live too. And these are just things that she writes about, some of the scary things that she goes through. And while she was very grateful that she was not in a concentration camp, she was annoyed with the other people in the attic with her. There's 8 people living in a very small area. For those that are interested, there are virtual tours online that you can see. They recreate what it looked like and how small the area is. And you can see why she gets annoyed with others, because she writes about her annoyance with others, how they will argue about space or food. And you basically, after you have an argument with someone, you can't even go anywhere. If you have an argument with someone, you can sometimes go outside here. They can't. They are stuck in that small little annex area. So that's what makes it even tougher. And she writes about that. It's almost like her passion is just on the page when you're reading it. And she shows her true feelings, because you see the real Anne Frank when you're reading the book. The book, when they released it, when they got her journal entries, they didn't try to make her seem like a perfect person. They didn't take journal entries out to make her seem like she was perfect. They show who the real person is. Like even when she has some faults in her, and you can read it in the diary, you can see some of the faults, they did not take that area out. They wanted to show who the real person is. And not only does she write about what it's like in hiding, but you also get to see like what is this like, just growing up again, you know, like what it was like for her growing up, you know, who she had a crush on, what she wanted to do in life, what her feelings were around school. And you just read all these things, and sometimes it reminds you of what you were like when you were growing up. You know, an example that she wrote at one point when she was 14, you know, she was 14 and she almost felt like she knew everything. She felt like she knew more than her parents on a lot of things. And I remember being that age when you're 14, you're like, I know more than my parents and all that kind of stuff. And you read some of that and it makes you think back to those times. But, you know, overall, you know, the book just reads very well. Despite it being written by like a 12 to 14-year-old girl, she is very mature at the way she looked at life. Like I was very surprised at the writing in it and how she looked at life. You just have to read it to understand. But, you know, it does read very well. And it's also sad knowing how it ends. It is sad knowing how it ends, but I definitely appreciate the book. It was a great experience reading it. It was definitely difficult to read it because it was difficult reading it knowing that this really happened, that a teenage girl wrote this and that she had to live through these things. This hiding in that small annex and every day of just having fear. But it made me definitely appreciate life, like knowing firsthand what this person had to go through and just difficulty, and just feel lucky for what I have. And I was sad when the book finished. I was very sad when the book finished because it has an abrupt ending. There was no way she could have planned the ending, you know, because the entries just stopped. And that's very sad that it just stopped. But I was also sad because you felt like you went through the journey with Anne Frank. And knowing they just stopped, it was just heartbreaking. Especially the second to last journal entry was just heartbreaking. But the book tells you what happened after. I appreciate the book did that. But it is still sad knowing that it ended. Now, some online claimed that certain points of the book were a little boring. I don't think so. But you have to remember, when you're going into this, you know, she's not solving some kind of murder mystery, or she's not like an undercover agent. So there's not some of these super crazy events like that, you know. You have to understand what you're going into, that you're reading the life of someone in hiding. So, you know, not every single entry is going to be like super on edge. You're sometimes just reading about her thoughts. So, you know, just understand that, and you want to understand knowing what you're going to read, because I think that's what makes the book great. Because most of the people online felt the book was great, and I felt the book was great as well. But you have to go in knowing it. And I would highly recommend this, but I would say this is better for people that are like over the age of 18, or maybe even over the age of like 25, or even the mid-20s, because I feel you will appreciate it more. As you get older, I think you appreciate the book more, because I read the book in middle school, and it was required reading. But because it's required reading, you know, I was reading the book just to get a good grade. I didn't care much when I was 12 years old. You know, I didn't understand the true situation. I didn't understand everything that was going on. And it was required reading, so I didn't think too much into it. But now that I'm in my 30s, I definitely appreciate the book a lot more. And it just gives me a different perspective on life. And that's why I loved the book this time, to where I definitely will read it again in the future, because I'm sure there are many things I missed when reading it. But I highly recommend it if you guys are interested. But thank you for watching my book review today. You know, hit the subscribe button if you're interested, because I always upload multiple different types of book reviews. If you guys have any comments, please post them in the comment section below, because I love hearing your comments. If you guys have any questions, post in the comment section. You know, I always love hearing your suggestions. But thank you for watching my book review today. This is Mr. V. Go enjoy reading.